Welcome back. I'm Anna Alicia. This will be episode 3 of No Bullshit. I've been coming at you with some reviews on different books and stream of consciousness, and today I'm just going to do the same thing. I don't believe it's an audiobook. I think it's an audio program, Zig Ziglar's Goals. I got it out from the library, and so it's in my audiobook section, but I don't think it's an actual book. But that's what we're going to talk about today. And so, here we go. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I actually wrote notes that I could read this time, so this should be a lot better than the last couple. Okay, so Zig Ziglar is an American author, salesman, and motivational speaker. He lived from 1926 to 2012. And I just have a couple quotes to start us off with, some of my favorite quotes of his, and they will be sprinkled throughout. But I figured I'd start with a couple that I enjoy. So one that I hear him say, and all the things that I've listened to, is you could get everything in life that you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And this one particularly that I'm about to read, I remind myself every day because I struggle with this one a lot. And it is, remember that failure is an event, not a person. And I need to remind myself that personally because I have like a perfectionism problem. And when I make mistakes and when I do something wrong, or if it's not perfect, or if it didn't go the way that I planned, I take that as a personal attack, and it makes me feel like a failure when it is just an event. Like, yes, I failed this thing, but it doesn't mean that A, I can't try again, and B, that I can't learn from this failure. Like, there's always something to be learned when things don't go according to plan. And I really appreciated the first time that I heard him say that because it hit home, and I've been trying to remind myself that regularly since, because just because I failed at something doesn't equate that I am a failure. So those are just two quotes that I wanted to start this off with. And so I just have a bunch of bullet points that I'm going to read off, maybe go off on a couple tangents here and there. But this is his process for planning and executing goals. I really liked the program. If you ever get a chance to listen to it or any of his audio programs, I suggest listening to them because they're fantastic. They're funny, they're kitschy, and they stick. They resonate. Even if they're older, they still are 100% accurate and applicable to today and to just everybody in general. So he starts off this audio program going over 4 reasons why people don't even bother setting goals. Like, not even failing to achieve goals or failing to execute goals. It's why they don't even set goals. And the first thing he talks about why people don't set goals is fear. And he uses, I don't know if it's an acronym, I'm not really sure what they're called, but fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And I've heard a lot of people say this before. I've heard Will Smith say it in a couple of his talks. I've heard other motivational speakers use that analogy for fear. And it's very accurate because our brains don't know the difference. Like, our subconscious doesn't know the difference between real and unreal. So it perceives and understands everything as a real. So when you're having a panic attack, you think you're dying because you're panicking, and you have those same responses of like, oh, I'm having a heart attack, when the reality of it is something triggered me to panic, and now my body's responding accordingly. That fight or flight kicks in, and some of us don't know how to snap out of that, and we go through, for me particularly, I go through physical symptoms when I'm having a panic attack that I need to be able to recognize, talk myself out of, and bring myself back to reality, because I'll be having a panic attack when I'm perfectly safe and fine. Flight or fight will trigger, and there isn't like a saber-toothed tiger trying to kill me. Like, I'm not about to get hit by a car. I am completely safe and sound, but my mind doesn't think I am. So then, boom, these things start happening. So I did appreciate that he covered that topic of a lot of the time people don't even want to write down their goals because of fear. And fear is a hell of a bitch, and she can destroy a lot of things, or she can make a lot of things great, because you can either let fear stop you or push you forward. And if you can be scared and still do something, the outcome, whether it's good or bad, is going to be worthwhile, because you push back that fear barrier instead of letting it be that brick wall that stops you where you're at. So the second thing he talks about for reasons why people don't set goals is self-image, and specifically a poor self-image. So people who have a poor self-image, an example would be not having confidence, or saying I can't do that because I'm not smart enough, or I can't date that person because I'm not pretty enough, or anything along those lines of negativity. And in the book, he goes over this story of Tom Hartman, and this was an overweight gentleman going through a divorce, hard times in life, things just not going the way he wants, and he ends up tagging along to a Zig Ziglar speaking event with his brother, because he had the day off and his brother had an extra ticket, and he wanted to flee the scene the second Ziglar started talking, because he had that moment of, how dare you have the audacity to tell me that I could be something, like I know better, kind of a mentality. And then he kept listening, and the things that kept getting repeated, whatever it is, it finally sunk in, and he started to believe, like he had an inkling of hope. And that, I feel like, is what all of us need, just a tiny inkling of hope that there's a chance, that there is potential, that something could be different than what it is now. That idea of, like, it doesn't have to be this way. And not only does it not have to be this way, it could be better. Like, it doesn't have to be worse, and I can change it. It is in my power to change it if I don't want to say follow certain rules, but like take a certain course of action. You know, if I take a certain course of action, I can change where I am in this moment, and a year from now I could be a totally different person, and for the better. It doesn't have to be me in a year from now being even worse off because I was too scared or in denial or I didn't have the tools, you know. And that's why I really like this talk, because he gives us the tools to put it on paper, and not only put it on paper, but narrow it down, and the motivation to execute, which I think is awesome. And the third thing he talks about, why people don't set goals, is that they've never been sold that having goals is good. And what he talks about is, a lot of people don't even know, or have never been told, that goals can get you somewhere. Like, goals aren't limited to personal, you know, growth or adventure, personal gains. Like, it can be for business, it could be for nations, it could be for teams. It's not limited to any one specific thing. Goals are a necessity, and they are for everyone. Groups, masses, countries, individuals. Goals are not specifically for people who have millions of dollars, and people excuse me, who have educations or anything like that. Like, it is not limited to any specific set of rules. Goals are for everyone, and everybody should have them if they want to have a prosperous, balanced, successful life, whatever that means for you. And the last thing he talks about, why people don't even set goals, is that they don't know how. And for the longest time, that was my problem. I just didn't know how to do the thing, and I had a bunch of excuses holding me back. And for the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of research and just listening and reading, and now I know better. Now I have some tools to guide me when I want to set some goals. And just this year, I came across this audio program, and it went even deeper into the realms of achieving and setting goals. And here are a couple more quotes that he says that I really appreciated. He says, direction creates time, and time creates energy. So you don't motivation doesn't create action and keep you going to the end. You have to create the action, and then motivation will spring forth once the wheels are turning. And another one is when you're tough on yourself, life will be infinitely easier on you. Meaning, if you do the hard stuff now, things will become easier as you go forward versus trying to take the easy road out now, thinking that long term that's going to pay off. And the last one I have written on this page is, how can you hit a target that you don't even have? And this was an analogy he had used when he was talking about shooting an arrow. And if you were to shoot an arrow blindfolded, well, how could you do that? Because you can't even see the target. That's silly. And he followed that up with, well, it is silly. So how can you hit a target you can't see? And how are you going to hit a target that you don't even have? And that target being goals. And how can you achieve anything, or even basic as changing the situation that you're in, if you don't have a goal or an end outcome that you're searching for, something to propel you forward, something to keep you reaching, something to push you beyond the boundaries and limitations that you are in this current moment. And then oh, I do have another quote. So here's another quote before I get into his steps of writing down your goals and how to write down your goals and then scratch the unnecessary things off your list and how to minimize your dreams and things like that. So the last quote I have here is, people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does taking a shower. So that's why we recommend taking it daily. So I really enjoyed that quote because it's that reminder that I can't survive today off of yesterday's efforts. Yesterday's efforts were for yesterday and it got me through yesterday. So I can't think that, oh, because I ate right yesterday, that today, if I slip up and do these things, I'm still going to have the outcomes that I'm looking for. So I really like this because I have to remind myself that, like, I need to motivate myself, inspire myself, put the proper food in my head so that I can maintain the outcomes that I want and maintain the momentum that I'm trying to get. Like, motivation doesn't last. Like, I can't think that, like, oh, I listened to this yesterday, so a month from now I'm gonna be just as motivated as I was when I first heard it. No, maybe if I listen to it every day, I will be just as motivated. But if I don't feed that energy will dwindle and die out. It's just like an engine. You have a tank of gas, and that tank of gas is not going to last forever. You have to refill that shit, or you're going to be stranded somewhere. And for me, I don't want to be stranded in life. So I'm trying to continually fuel my motivation so that I can continue to put one foot in front of the other and continue to fail and continue to learn until one day it all adds up to me being at the top of that mountain looking down at all the things that I've done. So we have 7 or so okay, we have about 9 steps for writing down your goals and checking them off your list. Sorry about this camera angle. I really need to invest in a little sitting mat so that I'm not squirmy wormy over here. But it's okay. That's my MO right now. So these are the things that he says. This is his process for writing down your goals. And I'm just going to read them right off of this paper. 1, print everything that you want to do or have or be in a list. And he calls this the wild idea sheet. And you're going to want to write this all down in one sitting, and then you're going to want to let it sit for a day or 2. No longer than that, because then you'll forget about it and you'll find yourself forgetting the whole beginning of the process. But you do want to walk away from it so that you can gather your thoughts and come at it with a fresh mind. But the idea is to print, not type, not scribble, whatever. Print, because it takes more mental focus, and it kind of supposedly like imprinted in your mind a little bit more than if you were to write it any other type of way. So you want to print all the things that you want out of life. And sorry. Even though I wrote this in Eater, I still apparently can't read my own handwriting, so thanks for bearing with me. So I just have a side note here that he had said specifically setting goals gives you a direction. And I think that's really helpful and something to point out, because when we want to go somewhere in our vehicle and we've never been there before, most of us GPS it, and our phones will tell us how to get there. So if I want this specific thing and I don't know how to get there, I want to be able to get directions on how to get there. But if I don't know where I'm going, I'm not going to be able to get directions. I need like a specific place, a specific location, a specific want, a specific goal. Because if I have that specific thing, then I can break it down into its components and gain some direction in where I'm going. So that's the first one. You're going to write down a list of everything that you want to be, do, or have in a list. And in 2 days or so, you're going to come back to it. When you come back to it, we're on step 2. You're going to write why after everything on this list. And you want to answer that in a sentence. Maybe 2, but you don't want to have a long drawn out answer. You want to be able to answer why in a brief sentence, and if you can't answer why you want this thing, then you can cross it off your list. We want to say no to the good so that we can say yes to the best. And that's another Zig Ziglar quote, and he says it throughout his talks, and I really like it because it reminds me of the fact that I am from an instant gratification generation where I want everything, and I want everything now, and I want it to be perfect, and I want that instant gratification. And I need to remember that if I want a specific thing, that A, it's going to take work, and B, that I am going to have to make sacrifices to the thing. And I have to understand that I'm going to have to make sacrifices and be willing to make those sacrifices. Because if I make those sacrifices, then I'll be able to get my thing. It's like you can't have your cake and eat it too, as much as we would like to. And as much as we do, because that is our society, it's not as satisfying when you have it both ways. When you sweat for it, it kind of means more in the end. So first is write it all down. Second is write your why in a sentence. And the third part was, if you can't answer why, strike it off your list. So number 4 would be balance. Next, we want to label every single one of the things that we have on our list as one of these 7 things. We have physical, mental, spiritual, social, financial, career, and family. So all your goals are going to be one of these 7 areas of your life. And you're going to want to go, after you do your whys, you're going to want to go next to everything and figure out what part of your life and what type of goal that is going to be. And the reason why you want to do this is because you want to avoid being warped in one area. So the goal is quality of life, not necessarily a quantities game. Like, having a nice car is fantastic and having the McMansion is nice, but if your quality of life is garbage, what does it matter that you live in a mansion? Because a mansion is not going to heal your soul on the inside. It's not going to fix that emptiness that you're trying to fill. It's not going to fix that imbalance that you have in your life. So number 4 was seeking balance in your list. So going through your list, what you haven't scratched out yet, and figuring out what part it plays. So again, those 7 things are physical, mental, spiritual, social, financial, career, and family. And so the 5th step in writing down your goals is because we're trying to minimize our things to a core couple that we can work on, because at the end of the day, we can't work on it all at once. So he has these 6 questions to answer for each one of the goals that you have written down. And so the first question is, will reaching this goal make me happier? And the idea here was pleasure versus happiness. And pleasure is more along the lines of that instant gratification. It makes me feel good right now, but it's not really lasting. And sometimes that what makes me feel good right now thing has long-term consequences, in the sense of like, I really like fucking ice cream, and I really, really, really enjoy junk food like cookies. Oh my God. Talk about being a cookie monster. It's not pretty. It's really not pretty. But that gives me pleasure in the moment. But long term, is it something that's sustainable? If I keep eating cookies the way that I do, am I going to be happy if I'm 600 pounds? Those are the things to think about with this question. Will reaching this goal make me happier? And for me, I wrote down pleasure versus happiness, and it's like temporary versus the long term. And so, number 2 of these questions to ask all these goals is, will reaching this goal make me healthier? And for the most part, all of these are yes or no questions. So you want to be able to answer yes to all these questions. And if you can't answer yes to all these questions, you're going to cross it off your list. And the goal here isn't to black out everything on your list and limit yourself in that sense. The goal is to scratch it off because maybe it's just not for right now, because you don't know where you're going to be in 10 to 15 years or even 5 years from now. And you might be in a different position to be able to achieve that goal. But the goal is right now going forward, we want to start limiting this list to realistic, attainable goals that we can work for. And these questions help us strike some stuff off of the list while maintaining that balance, if that makes sense. So the third question is, will reaching this goal make me more prosperous? Number 4 is, will reaching this goal make me more secure? And number 5 is, will reaching this goal make me more friends? And the last question is, will reaching this goal bring me peace of mind? So we have these 6 yes or no questions, and there is an extra question if you have a family, meaning wife, kids, people that are in your close bubble that may or may not be affected by your goal setting. So that final question, which is technically number 7, but only applies to those who have a family that can be potentially affected by these things. So that last question is for families, and it says, will reaching this goal improve my family relationships? And what he says is, if you can't answer yes to all of these questions, write it off your list. Scratch it off your list. Don't black out the goal. It may not work right now, but you don't know if it's something that's for the future. And your basic objective through all of this, and the reason why you're asking yourself all these questions, is total successfulsness. So it's that idea of a good quality of life. You don't want to be imbalanced in certain sections of your life that is going to cause you that deep inside pain that you don't know how to fix because you put too much into one thing or your goals weren't rounded out. So again, those 6 questions were, will reaching this goal make me happier? Will reaching this goal make me healthier? Will reaching this goal make me prosperous? Will reaching this goal make me more secure? Will reaching this goal make me more friends? And will reaching this goal bring me a peace of mind? And that last question is, will this goal improve my family relations? Step 6 in writing down your goals is understanding that some of these goals, they need to be big goals because you want to be able to stretch. You want to have something to reach for. You want to have those long-term goals that you're going to keep working towards. And there was this idea of the little itty bitty frying pan. So it was a story about this fisherman who was catching all these huge fish back to back to back, but he was only keeping the little ones. And someone asked him, why are you only keeping the little fish? I've never seen a fisherman do that. Like, you're hitting the jackpot right now. Why are you throwing them back? And the guy says, well, it's because I only have this little frying pan, so I can only keep these little fish. And the idea behind this is like, you can go get a bigger frying pan so that you can fry bigger fish, which is why you want long-term goals, because you don't want to limit yourself because you have a small frying pan. Like, because you have these limiting beliefs that are going to say, like, oh, I can't do that. That's too big. Like, give me a smaller one. Somebody else is going to do that. Give me a smaller one. That's not the goal. And another quote of his that he says that is really, really inspiring for me is, don't change your decision to go, change your direction to get there. And he uses this analogy of an airplane reaching its destination. When it leaves the airport, it's heading the way in which it needs to head to get to where it's going. But at some point, because of the curvature of the earth, because of the wind, because of all these other factors, that plane will drift, and you have to change direction to keep going where you need to go so that you're at your end destination. Like, a pilot isn't going to turn back around and try again and then just keep in that cycle. He is going to know that his outcome is over here, and that things are going to come up in the middle that's going to make us swerve and have to change direction to get to where we're trying to be. And one of the things that he talks about, and this is just another quote of his, is that temporary setbacks are like pebbles on the beach, and that's our goal. We want, instead of it being this big grandiose thing that's going to stop us and make us change our mind about achieving this goal, we want setbacks to be a little pebble instead of a giant boulder. It's easy to step over a pedal. It's a little more difficult to figure out how to get around a boulder. And the bigger we make these things, the harder we make it on ourselves. But if we can change our mindset so that these things are like, yes, it's a setback and that's okay. It's a little pebble in the grand scheme of things. It's a grain of salt in the grand scheme of things. And if we have that mentality, things become a little bit easier. And then he talks about how, like, not only do you need your big goals, but you need your small everyday goals, ongoing goals. So he talks about ongoing goals as being your self-image, your health goals, relationship goals, because these things are ever changing. Like, certain things in life can happen that will affect your self-image, your relationships, things like that. If you lose a job, that's a negative blow on your self-image. So that's something that we have to continually be working on, and that is what he calls the ongoing goals. And we want goals that, not that we want goals. Some goals may need consultation. So some health goals, some education goals, things that other people may have more knowledge and advice for you can help you maintain your goal. So if you need to lose weight, but you don't know how much weight you need to lose to be healthy, maybe seeing a doctor would be your quote-unquote consultation so that you could get the information and the feedback and the things and the steps that you need in order to move forward with that goal. And number 7 for number 7 for writing down your list of goals is check for negativity. If it's out of reach, that's one thing, but if it's out of sight, that's another. So what he means by check for negativity is if your goal is going to have a negative impact or if it's too far out of reach. So if you can't see the finish line, doesn't necessarily mean the finish line's not there. But if you're here and the finish line is 3 states away, that is a negative thing because you don't have anything to reach towards because it's too big. It's too big. And if it's out of your field, if it's out of your field, it also has a negative impact. So he uses a story of this guy who was boxing around with his brother, and he wanted to be the heavyweight champion of the world. And he asks him, okay, well, do you have any experience? Oh, I was boxing with my brother. I took him down so easily. Okay, does your brother have any experience? No, to both. So that's out of your field. So you need to understand that if it's out of your field, you're going to have more work, and you need to take specific steps to get more knowledge so that if that's a goal you want, you need to understand that, like, I have no knowledge in boxing. I would need to train boxing. I would need to get the experience in the ring. I would need to be able to get the fights under my belt to be able to work towards being a world champion, things like that. And so number 8 is more questions. Number 8 is 5 questions to ask yourself about the goals that are still remaining on your list. Because remember, throughout this whole thing, we are trying to cross out things from this list this entire time. so that we are slowly minimizing our goals so that we can have a nice small chunk of things that we can focus on. And like Matthew McConaughey would say, I want to get A's in these 3 things versus getting B's in these 7 things. So these are the 5 questions that he wants you to ask yourself about your goals. So 1 is it really my goal? Meaning, is it something that I want to do for myself, or is it something that my parents want? Is it something that a teacher wants? Is it something that has been given to me by somebody else and I'm pursuing it because somebody else had suggested it? Number 2 is it morally right to everyone concerned? Number 3 is, will it take me closer to or farther away from my major objective? Number 4 is, can I emotionally commit myself to start and finish this project? And number 5 is, can I see myself reaching this goal? So I like these questions because it keeps you on track when you're making decisions. So these questions, for me, I feel like I should ask myself these things on a daily basis when I want to go do something. I should ask myself, is this what I really want? Is it morally okay for everyone involved? And is it going to take me farther or closer to my dreams? And this one, I want to talk about because this one I find very helpful, because I struggle with food and bad habits and along lines of junk food and just not eating properly or not exercising enough. That is where I struggle. So recently I've caught myself saying like, oh, I'm going to go get Wendy's, right? And it's like, okay, I can ask myself this question. Is getting Wendy's going to take me farther away or closer to my weight goal? It is definitely going to take me farther away from my weight goal. So if it's going to take me farther away from that goal, then I should not make that decision. I should walk away from that and go make a better decision. So I really liked that question. And number 4 is, can I emotionally commit myself to start and finish this project? I really like this one too, because it puts it in perspective of, okay, can I hold myself accountable to start it and finish it? And if I don't think I can, then maybe I shouldn't do the thing. And the 5th question, can I see myself reaching this goal, really reminded me of the visualizations in The Secret, and it reminded me of what they talk about in The Secret of, if you can see yourself being a lawyer, or if you can see yourself being the thing that you want in life, if you could see yourself having $1 million, that is a key visualization needed to be able to achieve the goal. Because if inside your head you don't think that you can have the thing, then you are kind of subconsciously stopping yourself from achieving it because you don't believe that it's a possibility for you. So all the work you're putting up is going to be 10 times harder because you have those internal roadblocks of like, well, I don't really think that I could get that person because I'm not good enough, or I can't get that job because I'm not good enough, or I can't see myself doing that because I'm stupid. Like, if you have those in your head, then that's going to be a setback when you're trying to go forward in achieving your goal. And so the last step in writing down your goals is working that big old list down to about 4 things, because 4 things is like a reasonable number that you can work on at the same time. So you can work on about 4 things, say, every day to get you closer to your goals. So some of the things he talks about, if you still have a lot of stuff on your list, to help you bring it down to 4 things, is to take inventory of where you are right now. So understanding where you are right now and what it will take to get you to where you need to be for these specific goals. So if you have a goal of buying a house and right now you need to save a little bit more money, so maybe that can get put on the back burner, and saving your money and doing things like that can be put into the forefront. But understanding where you are, like, do you need more knowledge? Do you need to go to school? Do you need to do certain things to get certain outcomes? And if that's the case, then maybe you can't work on these 4 like right now, but it doesn't mean that they can't be worked on later on. but it helps you prioritize the 4 things starting from tomorrow that you could work on every day. And this is another quote of his that I really liked, is a goal properly set is halfway reached. And I like the specificity of it being properly set, because you could write down goals until you're blue in the face and it's not going to get you any closer to reaching it. But when you properly set a goal, in my opinion, that's understanding what it's going to take, where I am, how far away, what are the steps that it's going to take, what's my timeline. Like when you get the details of how, not necessarily how, but if you have more details going forward, you're going to have a better chance of sticking to the thing than like, I want to make $1 million and I'm going to have $1 million in the bank, and then you do nothing to improve your odds of having $1 million in the bank. So that was the 9 goals, or the 9 steps to reaching your goals. Oh my goodness, that was the 9 steps to writing down your goals. Thank you for bearing with me. So then he goes on to talking about the steps to actually reaching your goals. So now that we have everything written down and we've cut it down to those 4 things that we're going to focus on in the beginning, here are the steps that he goes over for actually reaching those goals. So 1 is to make a commitment, meaning if I'm going to start it, I'm going to finish it, holding yourself accountable to the thing. Number 2 is making daily detailed accountability. So with that is planning your day the night before, each week, looking back on the things that you've written down daily. How much progress did I make? Am I working on all those 4 things? Am I cutting short, or am I lacking in this? Should I be concerned that I didn't do this? Like keeping an inventory of kind of like where you're at. And number 3 is start with a solid foundation. So you want to make sure that you have your ducks in a metaphorical row when you start. So if your goal is to build a house, you need to make sure that the floor is level and that the floor is concreted down appropriately and that your foundation is solid. Because if you have a crooked foundation, everything going up is going to be crooked and it's going to have a higher chance of breaking later on. So I really like that idea of a solid foundation, because you don't want to build your house on a cheesy, haphazard, put together base, because it's not going to last long term. So we want these goals to last long term. So we're going to want to have a solid foundation. So if you need to go learn something so that you know going forward that, oh, if I didn't have this set of knowledge, I can't do this thing, or whatever it may be. So number 4 is changing your vocabulary. And that kind of reminds me of like self-talk and things like that. And it's just being mindful of what's coming out of your mouth. What are you telling yourself? What are the people around you saying? What's the music you're listening to? What are the things coming in? And how is it going to affect the things going out? Number 5 is divided into small bites. So this I really like, because it's that idea of breaking this giant thing that you don't know how you're going to do into small manageable pieces, because when it's in small manageable pieces, you can hit that first step and accomplish that appropriately than worrying about how you're going to finish the mile, because you're going to finish the mile 1 step at a time, and getting each step one after another is how you're going to get there. You're not just going to take a giant old leap and end up at a mile. So the example he uses is, if you want to lose weight, say you want to lose like 50 pounds, then it's breaking it down to like, how many ounces would I have to lose a day for how many days to reach my goal of losing 50 pounds? And when you look at it at how many ounces a day would I have to lose versus how many pounds a week or how many pounds in 6 months, it is a much more attainable, feasible thing and a manageable thing to digest than the giant, I need to lose 50 pounds and I need to do it by tomorrow, because that's how we are in today's society. So number 6, he talks about shape up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And he talks about how working out and building a strong body and having that fitness, all the benefits of having a physically fit body and being mentally sound and spiritually sound. So it just goes back to his idea of being balanced. We want to find balance, because if we're too much in one area of our life, something's going to be lacking and we're not going to have that quality of life that we're looking for. So number 7 is learn how to respond to disappointment. And he talks about, in one of his sessions, he talks about the difference between responding and reacting. So when you're reacting to medication, it's usually a bad thing. It means that your body's not taking it well and something needs to change. You either need to stop taking the medication, we need to follow X steps. You're reacting, which makes it a negative thing. But if you are taking medication and the doctor's like, oh, you're responding well to the medication, that is a positive connotation. It means it's doing what you wanted it to do. So it is... the goal with number 7 is to learn how to respond to things rather than react to things. So finding the opportunity in every obstacle, finding the positivity in every negative, it's about changing that perspective. It's that perspective game that you want to work out, so that instead of it being this giant detrimental thing, it's just that pebble amongst the pebbles on the beach versus a giant boulder blocking the road. So number 8 is discipline yourself. So discipline is an ongoing goal. That is something that's going to take time, and it's going to take practice, and it's going to take commitment. And so disciplining can come down to planning your day, recording your outcomes, things like that, like holding yourself accountable, saying like, I'm going to work out 15 minutes every morning this week, and getting up and doing your 15 minutes and recording it, so that at the end of the week you can say, I did these under my physical activities, and this is where I was at the end of the week. I did this many workouts. This is how I felt. This is how I was able to get through it, so that you can plan going forward to maintain those habits. And discipline's really, really hard, and it just takes time and practice, like all things in life, because I suck at discipline, but I know that if I just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep trying and keep learning and keep holding myself accountable, that the discipline will come. But I have to make sure that I keep doing the thing, because it's not going to last on yesterday's effort. And that is what I need to remember. And so number 9 is change direction to your goals when obstacles arise. Don't change your mind about achieving it. And we've already talked about this. So this is that idea of when something happens and you have to swerve out of the road, just swerve out of the road, versus, oh, that thing happened, so now I have to turn back and go back to the beginning, because it obviously is impossible because an obstacle happened. And this is also where that perspective game comes in, because you want to be able to change your perspective of my goal and outcome is still over there. I have to reroute myself to this thing. I'm not going to stop because I still want that goal. Obstacles are going to happen. That is just the definition of life. Excuse me. We are always going to have to work for things, and things are always going to happen. Murphy's Law is a very real thing. And you need to understand that things are going to happen, and because things are going to happen, we are going to need to be able to put up roadblocks in our head so that we can't turn back around. I'm committed to doing this thing. Okay, I slipped up, I failed at this thing, something happened, whatever it is, that's okay. I am going to reroute myself like a GPS would. If there was a car accident, I'm going to reroute myself, and I'm still going to get there. It just wasn't the way that I thought it was going to be. And I need to be open to the possibilities that it's going to happen differently than I thought initially. And that's okay. So number 10 on the list of reaching your goals is share your goals with everyone, and share your give up goals. No. I reversed that. My apologies. Rewind. Number 10 is share your give up goals with everybody and share your go up goals carefully. Share your go up goals with people who that you feel are going to give you the encouragement needed to get the things. And your give up goals, if I'm going to quit smoking, if I'm going to quit eating this way, if I'm going to quit talking a specific way, those give up goals you want to share with everybody because they can hold you accountable, versus your go up goals. Oh, I want to be the top salesman, blah blah blah. You don't want to share that with everybody at work because they might try to sabotage you. They might try to feed you those negative thoughts. They're not going to give you that encouragement that you need or want in order to achieve that goal. So number 11 is become a team player, and he uses the geese analogy where geese flock in a V formation, and the idea is that the V formation as a team, in this formation, they are able to break through the wind barrier better and go farther than they would if they were all individually flying in a line. And the other analogy was football teams, where it was great teams versus great players, and every time great teams always beat the great players. And when you think about it, becoming a team player is great for your career in the sense of no boss is going to want a know-it-all who can't work with the team. A boss is going to want a know-it-all who can work with everybody and who gets along with everybody and who can bring that team mentality to the table. So number 12 is to learn how to train fleas. So this part of the talk talks about conditioning, and it talks about being driven internally, so not allowing external things limit you, somebody else's belief that you can't do it or it can't be done, to limit you because you know better. And it goes back to the paradigms and conditionings that we have in our head that we can change and we can program them in. So instead of putting a cap on our jar, we need to understand that there is no cap and that we can jump out of the jar. And he talks about this thing called SNIOPs, and I thought that was really funny. It's SNIOP, and it's people who are susceptible to negative influence of other people. And his thing was like, don't be a SNIOP. And I don't know why, but I just thought that was really funny. So I had to write it down. So number 13, and the last thing in the steps for reaching your goals, is see the achieving, see the reaching, and it goes back to that visualization. See yourself doing the thing and see yourself having the thing. And it just always brings me back to The Secret when I think of that, and the way that they go over visualization and having that feeling of, I don't have the car, but I can feel the car around, my hands around the steering wheel and I can hear the engine revving, like picturing it like you have it already. That visualization makes attaining the goal so much easier. And it's not going to be easier, so do not take that out of context. Just because you visualize something doesn't mean that on the snap of a finger it's going to be easy and that it's not going to take work. It's still going to take work. But if you can visualize yourself achieving that goal, you're not going to set up those internal roadblocks that are going to stop you because you subconsciously think that you can't have it or you don't deserve it. So then there are a couple more things that he talks about, but these aren't part of the steps. These are just things that he talks about that are reminders, things to consider, let's say, things to consider when reaching, achieving, writing down your goals. And I just have these bullet points, so I am just going to read these bullet points off of this paper. So, an overwhelming desire to be successful, aka an absolute sense of mission. It's the other degree that makes a difference. So the desire, like having an obsessive desire to achieve the thing, is going to push you forward, and it's going to be one of those things that gets you to your goal. That absolute sense of mission, that I have to, I must, there's nothing that's going to stop me. The next thing he talks about is adversity, and I wrote down adversity breeds desire, desire breeds success. So having to go through adversity, having to be challenged, having to go through things, having to figure stuff out, like not having things super easy breeds a desire to go forward. So when you have to work for things, you have this sense of, I'm gonna have that because I know that I can work as hard as I possibly can to get that thing. And when you have that desire to be in a different place, to be in a better position than you are now, when you have that desire, it breeds that motivation and that drive to be successful. Remember the David Lachek story. So this story was actually really, really, really inspirational. It was about this kid. His friend's son had CP and cerebral palsy, and all the doctors had said that he was doomed to be nothing, and like, just write him off now for the family's sake. And the story is essentially how the parents did everything that they could possibly do. They had the personal trainer, they had the physical therapist, they had the means in place so that he could be beyond the CP. They treated him like a normal individual. They didn't allow the CP to limit him and his beliefs and his goals. And it was a very inspiring story. If you ever get to actually listen to Zig Ziglar talk about the Lachek story, I suggest listening to it, because anything I say about it is not going to do it justice. It was a fantastic, fantastic story. The next thing is, work is the price we pay to drive the road of success. And I really liked that quote because success isn't going to be as tasty when we get there if it was easy. And that's just something I think about a lot, that we need to kind of sweat a little bit for it to be worthwhile. And something else he says is, there ain't no free lunch, and that just goes back to, like, you gotta sweat a little bit to get there. And you're not gonna get these free handouts, and if you do get these free handouts, they're probably gonna set you back, and you're not gonna have that fight in you to get what you actually want, because there's something holding you back. The next bullet point I have is, you never work for someone else might sign your check. But it's that idea of, even if you're working for someone else, you're working for yourself, that your work matters. And no matter how much you're getting paid, no matter what circumstance it is always do your best. It's do more than what you are paid for. It will pay whether it's here or somewhere else. You will eventually be paid for what you do. Whatever the job is, do your best, do it well, even if it's beneath you. Because the worst thing that could happen is you get fired from a job that's beneath you, and then you go try to get a job, and they say, what happened? And you got fired from a job, and say it was, what does he use? He uses the example of filling sandbags. And it's like, oh, you couldn't fill sandbags? There's no way that you could do this, type of a thing. So whatever you're doing, do it to the best of your abilities. Like, don't leave anything on the table, no matter what it is. And my next bullet point is, do your work extraordinarily well. And that just ties in all the last couple bullet points that I just spoke about. And here's another Zig Ziglar quote. When you do the things that you ought to do when you ought to do them, you will eventually be able to do the things that you want to do when you want to do them. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where if you put in the hard work now, and if you make it a little tough on yourself now, it'll be easier down the road. That persistence is important. And another quote of his is, make failure your teacher, not your undertaker. A detour, not a dead end. And I really like that, because I feel like a lot of the time we as humans struggle with failure, because if we fail at something and it wasn't perfect that first time around, and especially for me, I feel like this is true, that's it. I'm a complete failure, I'm an utter piece of shit because I failed at the thing. When it's like, no, I failed at something, what can I learn from it? What can I do better so that the next time I do it, I have a different outcome, whether it's better or worse? Like, use it as a means to learn versus a means to sabotage and berate yourself. So the next bullet point is learn to love your work. And that is the idea of adjusting your attitude and taking pride in your work no matter what it is, and doing it well no matter what it is. Then he talks about another analogy, and it was the story of the boars and how these pigs got loose. Excuse me. He talks about how these pigs got loose, and generation after generation, they just became more wild, and they were becoming dangerous to the people. And that hunters could not catch them. They were super smart, and that they were becoming a problem. And he talks about how this old man comes with a donkey cart with some grain and some wood, some lumber, I believe was the word. And he just goes off into the woods. He puts his grain and lumber out on the floor. The boars see that. They're skeptical. But when they realize the coast is clear, they go and eat the food. And after the next day, he digs the posts into the ground. So now there's 4 posts. And the grain is still on the floor. The coast still seems clear. So the boars are still eating the food. And he essentially slowly builds a cage around the boars. And because the boars know that the food is good, and that the food is there, and that the food is safe, this dude is essentially able to build a cage around them and trap them, versus the hunting them down that was unsuccessful. And it's the idea of like getting a free handout kind of puts you in a cage, in the sense of like you're going to be dependent on that grain that's been there, versus going out and exploring and trying to find your sustenance and things like that. And this story, I don't give it justice. You should really like listen to the actual story, because I'm sure I'm not depicting it as well as I could. But this story reminds me of something that Seth Godin said in his book, The Icarus Deception, and it was like, how do you catch a fox? And essentially, like, you put food out for the fox, and the fox eventually starts eating it, and eventually you are able to build a cage around the fox the same way that this gentleman built the cage around the boar. And I just thought it was really cool that I could make that correlation of this older motivational talk to this newer modern version of it, and I just thought that that was really, really cool. And then I have some more bullet points, and I am just going to read them. So change. I gotta do to get okay. So what I was trying to write here unsuccessfully is the changing your perspective of I have to do this, in that negative connotation of, oh, there's going to be blah, 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 to like, I get to do this as it being a privilege. Like, I get to go to work every day. Not like, oh, I have to go to work every day. Like, I get to go to work every day has such a brighter, more positive outcome, because it is a privilege that you have the legs to get to work, or like you have the eyes to see a video, or you have the ears to hear the audio, or you could watch TV. Like, we have to count our blessings while we can, was the thing that I got out of that. And one of the other things he talks about is what you do off the job influences and impacts what you do on the job. And I find that very interesting, and it's very true. So if you're going to go out drinking all the time and blah, 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 and you're not recovering properly, like, it's going to affect your work. And be mindful of what you're doing so that you can be optimum and balanced in your life, so that you can have that quality of life that we're trying to look for. The next bullet point is be demanding of yourself. Your attitude determines your success. And he talks about the bamboo and how you plant a bamboo seed and you have to water it and nurture it for about 5 years before it even starts growing. But once it starts growing, it grows like over 60 feet tall, but it takes that 5 years of effort when you can't see that progress. But it's that commitment to knowing that in 5 years I'm going to be able to see that outcome. And he ends his speaking with the pump story. So he just talks about the water pump and how, water pumps take a lot of effort and you have to be consistent and super strong and like putting super amounts of effort in the beginning to try to get the water from the well out of the water pump. And you have to put water into the pump. You have to prime the pump in order to get something out of the pump. And I really like that because it's that idea of you have to put something in to get something out. It's like you have to put the fire into the fireplace to get the fire. You can't ask for fire and then put wood in there. So I really appreciated this story. And it talked about how you can't put like a half-hearted effort in the beginning because you're not going to get the outcome you're searching for. If you're pumping all lackadaisically, you're never going to have enough force to create the momentum that you need to get the water out. And I just really liked the pump story. So again, that's another story. If you ever get the chance, YouTube it, maybe find these audios. If you get a chance to hear him talk about the pump story, I think it would be a great listen. It was funny, but it was also super down to earth, and it had a lot of key lessons that are applicable to today, and they just kind of slap you in the face ever so perfectly, for me anyway. It was great. So the last thing I want to talk about that he talks about is principles, and he is a strong believer in principles, value, that integrity, character, courage, hard work, continuing to educate yourself on getting those things in line, having balance in your principles, like being able to be accountable to having principles in your life while you're trying to go through your goals and things like that. And I rambled a lot longer than I wanted, but this was a little bit more structured than the last one. Again, this was Zig Ziglar's audio program, Goals. I strongly suggest listening to it if you ever get a chance. It's a couple hours. It was totally worth a listen. I've listened to it probably about 50 times at this point, and it is good every time I listen to it, and I listen to it so frequently because I want those lessons and I want the principles to be ingrained. I want to be able to remember, and I want him to be able to motivate me on the regular. So I hope you enjoyed this rant review of Zig Ziglar's Goals audio program. I really appreciate you listening. Thanks for letting me ramble. I am sending good vibes worldwide. Again, this is Annalicia, and this was episode 3 of No Bullshit. Thanks!